Hello, everyone. Real quick before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you that I'm now offering functional lab testing within my program in full function. I am so excited. This is about to completely transform so many lives, and I cannot wait. If you have been feeling off, whether that's stubborn bloating, fatigue that won't go away, difficulty losing weight, sleep issues, acid reflux, painful periods, mood swings, whatever the case might be, functional lab testing may be exactly what you need. This goes so much deeper than any traditional, conventional blood work. It helps to uncover hidden stressors like hormone imbalances, gut dysfunction, poor detox pathways, chronic stress patterns, and more. And it really allows us to better understand how is the body functioning and how is this dysfunction potentially contributing to the way I'm experiencing life, the way I'm feeling and how I'm functioning on a day-to-day basis. So for a limited time, you can now book a free 45-minute consult to see if it's a fit. And because you are a podcast listener, I'm offering a special discount through the month of July so that you can take advantage of it at a discounted rate. All you have to do is schedule your free consult within the month of July and you will receive $150 off my coaching package. So, super excited for this offer. Mention that you came from the podcast on our call and you will immediately gain access to that discount. And we will talk all the details when we connect. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to supporting you. Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, certified holistic health coach, functional nutrition expert, and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the space within which we become well. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, self-development, gut health, mental health, and more. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Eat Functional Foundations. We are nearing the end of July, which means my series is coming to an end, and I wanted to be sure that I hit all of the areas that I wanted to hit because there's so many topics that I could cover and so many issues that I could talk about. So I have to, of course, prioritize what I find to be the most important ones, but definitely in episodes to follow of Let's Eat, especially diving into testing deeper, there will be lots of conversations had around case studies and issues that I encounter when working with clients and how I navigate them, just so you can get a very tangible understanding of how valuable testing is. So let's set the scene. I am very aggravated with Tao this morning. She just is doing all the things that I do not want her to be doing. So, to get her to cooperate with me, I gave her a full carrot stick, which she is now going to town on. And this will probably last me 5 minutes. So, love her, love her, love her. But boy, can she be difficult. And I have to get creative here. So, she's got a carrot where we're going to work with it. I am drinking my collagen matcha as usual. And then I also have some water with me with molecular hydrogen in it. I go through phases where I add this in. It's a product by Symbiotica. And basically, I learned through genetic testing that I feel like I say that sentence a lot. I learned through genetic testing. I did learn through genetic testing that my body has a harder time managing free radical damage and oxidative stress. It's essentially like the rusting of the body, the wear and tear on the body, if you will. We do test for this in functional testing. We're not testing for the genetic component, we're just testing for the presence of it. And it's a wonderful marker to just determine systemic inflammation and looking at one's lifestyle, we can determine what are the factors that are contributing to this and what can we do to prevent it from continuing moving forward. It's not that we want to reverse it because we can't, but what we can do is we can address it through diet and lifestyle so that moving forward, less damage is done. And so the molecular hydrogen that I'm drinking is a powerful supplement to incorporate to help combat that. Now, there's also a lot of lifestyle practices that we can incorporate, incorporating lots of antioxidants and avoiding, certain types of foods and so forth, processed foods, ultra processed foods, fried food, all of that good stuff. But because I know I have this inclination towards it, I incorporate this from time to time. But I want to get into it more regularly because it's really not hard for me to incorporate. I just forget that I have it. So that is what I'm drinking. And like I said, Tala was distracted in this moment, but maybe not for very much longer. But anyways, today we're going to be talking about women's hormone health. So all my ladies out there, I am imagining the majority of my audience do in fact identify as female. And we're going to be talking about PMS, hormonal shifts, what testing looks at as it relates to hormones. I know we talked about this kind of intermittently over the course of the past several episodes, but I realized I didn't spend a ton of time on this topic, and I want to be sure I talk about this and perimenopause and menopause and all the things and how testing kind of plays into that. And what I really want to focus on is PMS and estrogen dominance, which is very common. I think we as women have just decided that during certain times of the month, we should just forfeit functioning and we should just be in pain and feel debilitated. And that, unfortunately, is a narrative that does in fact exist within our culture, but it should not, because there's a lot that can be done to mitigate the discomfort and not have such severe PMS and feel as though that 1 week, or even some cases 2 weeks, you're out of commission. And I don't think that makes any sense at all. That's a whole bunch of time in our life that we are just struggling. And we've just allowed this narrative to be true. We've allowed this to be, the justification for taking over the counter meds at this point in time every month, or taking off of work, or eating a pint of ice cream, or whatever the case might be. And I'm here to tell you that just because it's common doesn't make it normal. So, to give you a little bit of a crash course on hormones, I think estrogen, especially, we do not fully recognize how valuable it is, and I don't think we recognize that until we are postmenopausal and estrogen has declined and everything goes wrong. It is so important. It builds, it energizes, it sharpens the mind. I mean, it plays a role in so many areas of the body. There are estrogen receptors across the board systemically. And I don't think we appreciate estrogen until it's no longer there. And then women who are postmenopausal are experiencing all of this dysfunction and they're like, what in the world? And it's as a result of the fact that there's been a shift in estrogen. I just started reading a new book called The New Menopause, and she outlines, this is Dr. Mary Claire Haver. She's a very well-known menopause focused, I don't know if she's a gynecologist or I think she's a primary care doctor. I don't know what her specialty is, but she lists like a whole page and a half of symptoms that accompany menopause, and it's like all over the board. They're all over the board, neurological, digestive. I mean, there's so many different symptoms that, and if you are listening and you are postmenopausal, I'm sure you understand. I'm sure you relate. And for the clients of mine who are either perimenopausal or postmenopausal, they can attest to this for sure, that they experience just such erratic, random symptoms, and it's all on account of the fact that estrogen has declined. Obviously, there's other considerations there. I don't want to just, say it's just this, but it's just important that we're conscious of this as premenopausal women, and just understanding the role that it plays in the body. Then there's progesterone. This calms, balances, it's relaxing, supports your sleep and your mood. Testosterone drives our libido. This was described in the course as the kind of get up and go hormone, like the seize the day, take it on type of day. It has a lot of a responsibility with motivation and strength. I learned that I have low testosterone, which I had been talking about how hard it's been for my body to hold on, not, I don't want to say hold on to muscle mass, but just, I don't want to even say build muscle mass. Like I feel like I have solid muscle mass, but I was having a hard time recovering from my workouts. And I thought maybe it had to do with the fact that I had just started teaching. And so I I was doing a lot more activity. And so I was like, well, this makes sense. Like I'm moving more, but my body just felt more fatigued, and I was having a harder time wanting to work out and feeling like I had the stamina to do it, or like the desire. I also kind of attributed it to like just not wanting to do the Peloton anymore, which I've contemplated just canceling. I'm also wrestling tallow as we speak. So just so you're the carrot lasted not very long. Um I also attributed to the fact that I was just kind of getting bored of Peloton. So I thought maybe I just wasn't interested. And so that kind of dampened my interest and motivation. But, anyways, then there's DHEA. And we talked about DHEA in the first episode. This is an anabolic hormone, which means to build up. And it's also the parent hormone, the precursor hormone to our sex hormones. So, the important piece here that I want to be sure I mention, and I mention many times, is if we have heightened cortisol or we have dysregulated cortisol in relation to DHEA, there's going to be a suppression in our DHEA. And then as a result of that, if DHEA is the parent hormone of these incredibly important sex hormones, then we know that there's going to be dysfunction there. We know that there's going to be a problem there, because if there's not enough DHEA to then create these sex hormones, that's a problem. Now, as we've learned over the course of the past several episodes, the body's always going to prioritize our survival over anything else. So when it comes to any kind of stress, and we're in a space of stress, the body's not worried about metabolism. The body's not worried about reproduction. The body's not worried about digestion. The body's worried about your safety. And you might say, well, Emily, I'm not in any danger. Yeah, I know. I understand that. But your body thinks you are. And that's one of the biggest lessons that everyone needs to learn is the nature of our world, whether it's the personal stressors that you're navigating, or financial stress, or stress in our country, cultural stress, whatever the stress is, your body doesn't know the difference between that and an actual stress and an actual threat to your survival. So the more stress that we have, which you might argue, how is it possible to not have stress? It's not. And that's what makes this so complex, is there's only so much we can do to mitigate the stress. We can choose to relinquish stressors that are in our control. We can choose to build our resilience towards stress. But what's most important here is that we're acknowledging that with a chronic release of cortisol, we are going to see a suppression in that DHEA production. And then as a result, it's going to impact our anabolic hormones, or our steroidal hormones, our sex hormones. And this is this is the case, I think, for a lot of people. This is also the gray area, because if we know our survival is number one priority, then everything else is dispensable. Everything else can go, because at this point in time, the body is physiologically wired to keep us safe. And as I said, reproduction is not a priority for us, especially because if you're in a state of stress, the body's not going to want to, you know, reproduce and bring another being into a stressful environment. So your body's not going to reproduce because of that. And your sex hormones are going to be compromised as a result. And usually this is the first area to go. Usually this is the area that's impacted first, because it's kind of like the low-hanging fruit. All right, we're in a matter of stress. We need to, be sure our resources are being diverged to where they need to be utilized. So this is one of the first areas that's compromised. So keep all of that in mind, especially as it relates to your own circumstances, because this is hormonal imbalance 101, and it's a problem and it's driving a lot of the issues. It's not being detected by our healthcare system. And that's where I have a serious problem with anyone going to the doctor and asking for hormone testing. If your doctor honors that request, because a lot of times they won't, at least from what I've heard in my own experience. This is something that's not being looked at, and it has to be because it's the beginning stages of that dysfunction. So, when it comes to common imbalances and when it comes to what we see on the surface and what we experience as women, I'm going to speak to PMS right now and then get into estrogen dominance a bit. Estrogen dominance can be something that at any stage in life you can experience, and men can even experience it too. So I don't want to just limit this conversation to women, but I think this is something that's talked more about in women, and I want to speak to it as it relates to our cycles. So, having heavy periods or painful cramps, this is often a reflection of having excess estrogen. And excess estrogen is not uncommon. And as I said, there's a concept called estrogen dominance. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that there's high estrogen, it can be the case, but estrogen dominance refers to the phenomenon when there is elevated estrogen in comparison to progesterone. Once again, this is another checks and balance system within the body, and we want a healthy amount of estrogen to progesterone or progesterone to estrogen. And when there is an imbalance there, this can result in something called estrogen dominance, as there can also be progesterone dominance. And what we know about this is typically, if there's elevated estrogen, this is a result of the fact that the liver is not able to metabolize estrogen properly. And this is something that I think is a lot more common, not diagnosed, and is driving a lot of how we're feeling, like having heavy periods or painful cramps or any kind of issues like fibroids. Those are very connected or associated with estrogen dominance. So, understanding this first and foremost, and then looking at it through a functional lens and utilizing functional labs can really uncover, is this happening? Is this phenomenon an issue for this person? And how do I support the body so that estrogen clearance is taking place? Now, excess estrogen can be the result of a number of issues, whether it's you're exposed to xenoestrogens within the body. So these are chemicals and toxins and so forth that we're exposed to in our everyday life that then mimic estrogen within the body. And that can be extremely problematic. This could also be maybe you've just transitioned off of birth control and you haven't given your liver the support that it needs. So now you have this recirculation of estrogen within the body. It can be either excess estrogen or poor detox, as I said before. So it can be whether it's liver congestion, which is not uncommon for women, or there can be an excess of estrogen for a number of different reasons, and either one requires support. So, estrogen dominance is something I'll continue to talk on throughout this episode, but I just want to clarify both not the fact that it's high estrogen per se, it can still be low estrogen. You can still have low estrogen and be estrogen dominant, which is confusing, but you can have symptoms of low estrogen, but then also symptoms of estrogen dominance. And then it is about that ratio between estrogen and progesterone, and excess estrogen or estrogen dominance rather is a result of either having poor detox. So there's a couple different markers that we can look at that tell us about liver congestion, and then also just the presence of excess estrogen can result in what we experience as heavy periods or painful cramps. Short cycles and spotting can be a result of low progesterone. Mood swings, anxiety, irritability. This can be a byproduct of estrogen dominance. It could also be something related to HPA axis dysfunction. So, this is when we get cortisol involved and we talk about the HPA axis and look at your cortisol rhythm. Breast tenderness, water retention, and cravings. This can be a result of just inflammation, which is obviously very common, and cortisol imbalance. And then acne, low libido, and fatigue. This can be a result of low testosterone. As I said before, it's like the get up and go hormone. So low libido, fatigue, just feeling that kind of sluggishness. And then androgen imbalances. Typically, androgens are looked at to clarify with PCOS. And acne is a very common issue that's seen because it's typically an overproduction of oil on the skin, which then results in breakouts. So, the reason for sharing this is not to necessarily pinpoint, like, oh, well, this might be the reason why you're having this, or this might be the reason, it's more just to demonstrate that these commonly found or commonly experienced symptoms that women experience during their cycles are directly correlated with imbalances in our hormones. And so this is the message I want you to take away. This is the learning opportunity is it's not so much about, oh, I have low progesterone, so I should supplement with liquid progesterone or liquid, a liquid supplement, right, to help balance it. That's not the point. I'm going to get into that a little bit moving forward. The point is, let's look at the whole picture and understand why do I have low progesterone? What is going on within the body? I myself have low progesterone currently. I'm working on it. But just as an example, why is it there? Why is this happening? And what do I need to do about it systemically to not just put a band-aid on a symptom, but instead, address it from more of a let's look at the reason behind it so that we can stop it from happening. And if we're just putting a band-aid on it, we're not really getting to that dysfunction that's there, which is then just going to create other issues. So that's really what I want you to take away, as opposed to looking at like, oh, well, heavy periods, estrogen dominance, or short cycles, low progesterone, and looking at it kind of very black and white like that. I want you to kind of zoom out. Let's zoom out together and understand that this is really just a collection of hormonal imbalances that are there. And so as a result of that, it's manifesting in X, Y, and Z ways. But we don't want those imbalances to continue to persist because it's really speaking to a larger problem. Now, as I said at the beginning, if there's a cortisol to DHEA imbalance, this might then leach into issues like we're seeing, where there's imbalance with our sex hormones. So low progesterone, is that a byproduct of having low DHEA or excess cortisol? So do you understand? I'm asking you as if you're right in front of me, but I'm going to do it anyways. Do you understand what I mean by that? Where I'm saying it's not about looking at these hormones individually and then treating each hormone based on the symptom that accompanies it. It's instead looking at, why is my body not balanced? Why is this happening? And what is the driving factor behind it so that I can kind of put all of these pieces together and better understand the picture overall. And so this is another reason why we look at all the labs in tandem. We look at your gut because it has a massive role with hormone metabolism and hormone breakdown and hormone production even. It has a massive relationship with the liver. And as I said before, if we're not clear on what's going on with the liver and if there's liver congestion present, then we won't know why there's excess estrogen. If in fact there's excess estrogen, we can't just assume that there's liver congestion. Maybe liver is okay. Maybe the liver's doing just fine and there's still excess estrogen. Okay, well, let's explore what that means and why that's happening. We also need to know the cortisol picture. Right now, the test that we do implement is a stress and hormone profile, which is going to give us the it's going to give us all of that together. So it wouldn't be an isolated test that would separate the two. We look at cortisol, we look at our sex hormones, but it's just really interesting when you take this approach and you start to look at things more collectively and more as a whole picture, because we are in fact a whole body, because it gives us so much more insight on what is going on. I'm never going to say what's the root cause, because we don't necessarily care about the root cause per se. Yes, it can be valuable to understand the driving force behind some of the dysfunction, but as long as we have a solid picture of all the components that are contributing to this dysfunction, we have all of these healing opportunities in front of us to do something and address them, right? To mitigate the dysfunction, to restore balance, to coach up the resilience in the body, be able to, improve one's vital reserve. I use that term probably in the first episode, but basically just bolstering the body's ability to respond more effectively to these stressors so that the imbalances don't persist. So, before I move into perimenopause and talking a little bit about this hormonal transition, I just want to be sure that the main points are made clear. We have normalized living in extreme pain when it comes to PMS. I know for me, I would come home from school in high school because I had such painful cycles, even in my early 20s. And I would even say, even just within the past 2 years, this was really when I started to clarify and work on examining, okay, what is happening here? What is this demonstrating? Why is this happening? And what can I do about it? So, I got my test results back, and I believe, if I remember correctly, I had low progesterone, low testosterone. I had slightly elevated estrogen. So, working on all of that now through my own protocol, I am taking a liquid progesterone. I'm starting it actually today because I have to take it during my luteal phase. And that is just meant to mitigate dysfunction and start to replenish the body's you know, progesterone, but it's not meant for me to be on forever because at the end of the day, my body knows how to do this. It's just there's imbalance there and I need to address it. So, starting that shortly, but I want to make sure I make it very clear. If you are a woman and you have a painful cycle, whether you are 20, you're 30, you're 40 and you're still cycling, whatever age, please consider what your symptoms are showing you and what they're saying to you. I think this is one of the biggest deficits in healthcare. I think women's health is a massive deficit in healthcare, but especially when it comes to our understanding of our cycles. I think we don't have enough education around our cycles. We don't talk enough about what happens with our hormones during our cycles. And we think the only solution to a painful cycle is a birth control prescription. And that is not the case. I never want to come across as though I am a medical provider. I'm certainly not, nor am I giving medical advice, but I want you to expand your understanding of this topic, and that is what you are here to do. You are listening to this episode for the sake of that. And so I'm going to give you the information and then you can decide how you choose to proceed with it. But we don't deserve to live this way. There is meant to be some discomfort around your cycle. There's a massive, massive change going on within the body. And so just know it's not meant to be painless. I think there are some individuals who have pain-free cycles, and I think that's incredible. But some discomfort is not abnormal. But extreme debilitating discomfort or extremely heavy flows or cramps that cause you to vomit and you're in bed all day, or you're taking Midol every 3 hours or whatever the case is, all of that is a sign that there's a hormonal issue going on. And functional testing does a beautiful job at piecing together the pieces, showing us where your hormone levels are at. We use saliva to test for each hormone and then allows us to look at those hormones in light of other markers that put together the pieces for us, because we know our gut, our liver, and our hormones have a dynamic relationship. There's a trifecta there. I said this in the last episode when we talked about the liver. So I want you to really consider this, and whether or not you decide to pursue testing, that's completely up to you. I'm not, here to force you into anything, of course, but I want to encourage you with this. If this is something that you navigate, just know that testing can be a tremendous resource to better understanding your hormones, and not just when it comes to cycles. I don't want to get too much into this topic, but also as it relates to infertility, as it relates to fibroids or, ovarian cysts, things of that capacity that we don't talk about enough in healthcare. We've kind of written off as just being normal, and we can really understand your body better and your hormones better and these issues better by looking at tests, by utilizing the data that we derive from testing. So keep that in mind. There are more solutions out there outside of just birth control. You don't have to live in pain. You don't have to just accept that this is a part of being a woman, because that's what we've been led to believe as a culture. And unfortunately, it is causing a lot of us to live in pain. And then not only that, I mean, persistence with these imbalances are going to manifest in other ways. So it's all inflammation at the end of the day. And so this is going to then manifest in greater issues down the line. And so addressing it now and getting ahead and really looking at this issue right now can prevent it from expanding and evolving into something that's a little bit more extreme. I also want to say, while we're on the topic, I guess we weren't really on the topic, but on the topic of birth control, please know that your primary care doctor, your gynecologist, is not going to give you the guidance that you need to support your liver and your gut while you transition off of birth control. If you're coming off of birth control, I encourage you to seek out support or do your research on how to do it most effectively. This drives me up a wall. I think doctors are telling women, just come off of it, just stop it. And what's happening here is they're coming off of it. Maybe they're okay for a couple weeks, maybe they're okay for a couple months, but then their symptoms sometimes come back, and they maybe sometimes come back with a vengeance, or new symptoms appear, and women think, "Oh, I need to go back on birth control because I didn't have this before, or that's what saved me." And then they go back on birth control, and they think that this is the only way to live, that they have to be on birth control in order to avoid all of those symptoms. Yes, the transition coming off of birth control can be tricky, especially when you've been on it for a decade, 15 years, 20 years, however many years. But if you implement support, even just a month, 2 months, 3 months prior to coming off of it, for your liver, for your gut, and really focus on being intentional about supporting those areas, the transition can be wickedly smoother, so much smoother. So I just want to put that out there. I feel very passionate about this because I think a lot of doctors, and I'm seeing this with my clients, a lot of doctors are just telling them to come off, and they're having horrible experiences thereafter. Some people not so much. Everyone's different. But I had a client who came off in October, and she didn't support her body because she didn't know she needed to. And we've spent the past couple weeks, couple months, just discussing that a little bit more, but also seeing some shifts in her cycle and her symptoms, which are likely just a byproduct of her body just detoxing and her body regulating itself, essentially. And that's what happens, especially when you've been on it. I don't know the exact kind of translation, but I've heard them say, like, for every year you're on it, you should account for a month of rebalancing or regulating. Don't quote me on that, but considering that too, how long you've been on it and how your body needs to adjust, giving yourself that that kind of, I don't know, that reminder that it can be a year, of adjustment, and it can be a year of your body kind of figuring itself out, and that's not always going to be the most comfortable experience. But for me personally, if you are I think there's a lot of issues with birth control that is not talked about enough. I don't want to get into it here. Maybe that's another episode. But if you have alternate forms of birth control that you can turn to use, if that's a concern for you, then by all means, I think that would be the most health focused option. But when it comes to transitioning off of birth control, I just want to say this very loud and clear. Please take the time to understand what you need to be doing to support the body, to address the issue preemptively, and then support it while you've come off of it. I think your experience will be a ton more comfortable. I mean, I say I think, but I know I've seen clients do it. So, and if I can support you, this doesn't mean that you have to do functional testing. If you're interested in the transition, I'm happy to support you just through holistic health and functional nutrition coaching to help that transition for you become a lot more smooth. The grammar police in me cannot move forward without correcting myself there. A lot smoother. The transition will be a lot smoother. Not a lot more smooth, Emily. A lot smoother. Okay, I just had to say that. Okay, so let's talk about perimenopause and what this means. I'm going to give you a crash course on it, and then we're going to dive into a little bit about testing alongside it. This, I feel, within the past year has been the greatest complaint that women have come to me for. I have been seeing women between 35 and 50 who are in this space and don't know what in the world is going on. and are having trouble losing weight, are having lots of symptoms, are feeling all the things, and want help. And I just don't think we talk about this enough. How many times am I going to say that in this episode? That should be the name of this episode. I think it's going to be things we don't talk about in healthcare enough. Seriously. So, okay. That was kind of funny. Things we don't talk about in healthcare enough. That could be hours and hours and hours of an episode. Maybe that should be a new series. Honestly, that could be a new series. So anyways, perimenopause is a transition before menopause. So a woman's hormones begin to shift in preparation for the end of cycling, for the end of menstruation. So it's not just a few months of irregular periods. In order to be out of perimenopause and to be menopausal, you have to have no cycle for a whole year. So this can be obviously very frustrating for some because you could be going on 8-9 months without a cycle and then get it again, and then that restarts your clock. So on average, it can last anywhere from 4 to 10 plus years. And on average, it begins mid to late 30s or early 40s. Some women start earlier. So it's all very varied. And so menopause is technically just one day. And then you become postmenopausal after that. But perimenopause is the years prior. Okay, so let's talk about what happens here hormonally. So ovulation becomes inconsistent. And so then as a result of that, less progesterone is produced. And as we mentioned before, if we have less progesterone and more estrogen, even if estrogen's normal, this can result in estrogen dominance. So during perimenopause, women can experience this where their cycles become more painful, become heavier. I'm thinking of a client right now. She told me her cycles have just been so heavy, and then she got functional testing from a functional medicine doctor, and the doctor told her she has estrogen dominance, which is not uncommon because there's obviously a shift happening where it's almost just happening organically because the change is taking place. Now, estrogen becomes erratic during this time, so it's not going to just decline in a linear way. It's going to show spikes and crashes pretty unpredictably. And this results in hot flashes, this results in brain fog, insomnia. And then also, our adrenals take on a much bigger role. And if they're already overtaxed from chronic stress, then perimenopause is going to hit harder. And I think this is the case. I don't even think we can say if adrenals are taxed. Like, we can assume that most women, I would say women blanket statement, have taxed adrenals in some capacity. It is a spectrum. So obviously, we know that with anything, there's going to be more severe cases than others, but this is where DHEA and cortisol must be prioritized. And what happens here is testosterone and DHEA gradually fall. So, as we learned about testosterone earlier in the episode, this is going to lead to fatigue, low libido, loss of motivation or drive. It's going to impact our muscle mass. And then if our DHEA is falling, what do we know? I'm going to give you a pop quiz here. What does that mean? If our DHEA is declining, that then automatically means the cortisol to DHEA ratio is going to be imbalanced. We're going to have an imbalance there, and that leads to all sorts of issues, including weight loss resistance, which is so common. So symptoms that are common within perimenopause, they may come and go. They might intensify with stress. They might shift over the course of your time in perimenopause. This can look like irregular periods. So that can be shorter, longer, heavier, or skipped altogether. Worsening PMS or new onset of anxiety, irritability, poor sleep or waking between 2 and 4 a.m., night sweats and hot flashes, especially premenstrually, weight gain or difficulty losing weight. This, I think, is the most common issue. Breast tenderness, migraines, mood swings, vaginal dryness, low libido, brain fog, or difficulty concentrating. And all of this is relevant to the fact that there's hormonal fluctuations going on. Typically, there's a lot of blood sugar dysregulation, especially when we see issues with cortisol or if we're just not balancing our blood sugar as it is. Inflammation, adrenal fatigue, which is something that we can look at through testing. So it is so important. it's so important that we're aware of what's going on, because a lot of women are just so confused and are feeling angry and resentful towards their bodies, and no doctor is giving them the guidance or the education around what is going on here, and that's not fair. That's not fair. We deserve to know, and you are going to school to be educated on this. So why are you not telling me about what's going on? And the problem is spoiler alert, is they're not being educated on this, at least not enough to give them the guidance from like a holistic, more functional perspective as to how to address it most effectively. So, with testing, this can clarify a lot for us. It can explain a lot. It can show us a lot of where your hormones are, what's going on with your DHEA, your cortisol. And not only that, we can also look at your liver and your gut. And I mean, just addressing whole body inflammation can make a world of a difference as it relates to these changes. We have to acknowledge we are swimming upstream when it comes to being in perimenopause and then transitioning into menopause, and that's the nature of the way our biology works. But if we have the right tools and if we're supporting the body effectively, it can make a world of a difference in our experience. And this is so irritating that this is not something that's talked about enough. So then these women from 40 to 80 are having these horrible life experiences because of the fact that they're dealing with all of these symptoms, and they're miserable and they're gaining weight and they don't understand why, and they're at war with their body. And it just doesn't have to be like that. It can be so much more graceful. We can embrace this time in life and look at it as just a beautiful part of being a woman and how our life stages unfold. And instead we're going in it kicking and screaming and like miserable. And I laugh about it, but I'm sure at one point in time I'm not laughing as like a let's be insensitive, but I'm laughing in the sense of like, why are we doing this to ourselves? And I'm not even blaming anyone for this. I'm blaming our medical system. Yes, okay, so I am blaming someone. I'm not blaming women who are perimenopausal. I'm blaming our medical system for not giving the support that women deserve and need during this critical time. So, an important note to be made here is like the changes that are happening in a woman's biology during this transition are inevitable. We can't necessarily change the fact that biologically these changes are happening. But if you are already stressed, if you're already depleted, if you're already inflamed, if you're already dysregulated, if you're already in the space where your body's compromised and depleted, then it's going to make the transition 1,000 times more challenging. So, by understanding what is going on, accepting and being at peace with the change that is inevitably going to happen, but then taking the necessary steps to support your body and bolster your body to navigate this transition in the smoothest way possible, that is the goal. It's not like we're trying to delay this change or to reverse it. It's not possible. These changes are going to happen. But I think what's making it so hard for women is they are not taking care of themselves enough, and not in the sense of they're not eating well or they're not moving. I think some are not, but most are, I would say. But they're not understanding the mechanisms underneath, and there's still persistent inflammation. There is dysfunction that maybe took place in their 20s, in their 30s, and now going through menopause or perimenopause, it's manifesting in a lot of this difficulty. I think prevention's the best medicine, right? So if you are in your 20s, there's a lot you can be doing now that's going to impact your experience in your 40s, 50s, and 60s and beyond. I feel that way. Everything that I do now is not only to feel good right in this moment, but it's also to impact the person that I'm going to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and beyond. It's the investment. And I think that's such a mindset shift that needs to take place is there's delayed gratification here. Yes, you're going to feel good tomorrow and the next day when you work on your sleep and you improve your nutrition and take that extra step to invest in your health. Absolutely. That's why I feel the way that I feel. However, the long game or the end game is the person I'm going to be in 40 years and what I'm doing now to be the person that I want to be in 40 years, essentially. So, back to my original point. I think all of these women who are perimenopausal are not getting the guidance. I'm hopeful that my generation and younger are getting the information now so that we can be preventative and proactive so that in 20 years when we are, who am I kidding? I'm 30. I'm not going to be 20 years into perimenopause. Menopause. Maybe, probably not. we'll say in the next couple decades, when we head into that period in our lives, we're better equipped and we've done the work beforehand to make that transition easier for us and to help us feel better in light of the fact that these transitions are inevitable and this is a part of aging and this is a part of our biology, and it's how it goes. Sorry about the rustling in the background. I had my toddler of a child. She's now actually like more of a teenager, I feel like, the way she's behaving, but with my yogurt cup. So she just decided to walk around and drag it on the wood floor and, make lots of ruckus with it. So my apologies if the background noise was loud. But we're back. So this episode was really meant for me to just give you my essentially insights and my thoughts on the concepts of women's hormone health and then like the major events that take place in women's health and as it relates to hormones. Now, perimenopause I think is more of a mystery. Menopause is still a mystery, but I think that there is more understood there, I guess, or at least offered to women. I could be wrong. I don't know. I haven't hit that phase of life yet, though I've talked to many, many women about this. But regardless, functional testing can do a ton to help us understand your hormones, of course, first and foremost, but also what is the environment of your body? What is going on within the body? If you are perimenopausal, if you are menopausal, postmenopausal, we'll say, regardless of whether or not your biology is changing, you can still create an environment that's better to support the changes that are happening. Because we know if there is stress, if there's dysfunction, if there's any kind of imbalance that's happening, it's going to aggravate the already existing changes that are taking place. We want smooth sailing for you as you move through these changes. And by looking at some of these markers that can give us clarity on the terrain of your body and determine what areas need more support in order for us to lessen the intensity of the perimenopause experience, postmenopause experience. I want to make it very clear. The goal is not to reverse it or to stop it because it's going to happen, but there can be a lot of support given to the body to make it more bearable. So, I hope that this was helpful and I didn't go as in depth as I probably could have, and I'm sure there will be many episodes in the future that cover this topic, whether it's through further diving into other hormone related issues or talking about certain clients and their experiences and case studies and whatnot. But I think the first thing I recommend to you is pay attention. Pay attention to your cycle. Pay attention to how you're feeling. Pay attention to what your body's telling you. Your cycle is your body's report card. Your period is your body's monthly report card, and it gives us a ton of information. It is not glamorous to not have a cycle, not have a period. It is not normal to have painful cycles. It's common, but it's not normal. And the more that you can familiarize yourself with the quality of your cycle and what's going on, the more information you have to gather then around what can be done about it. And I think that's huge because you can do something about it. I have a client who I've been working with now for, I guess, probably a month and a half, 2 months, maybe, yeah, probably, maybe even longer than 2 months, maybe 2.5 months. And we have been tracking her cycle mostly because a lot of her symptoms are cycle focused, but just keeping an eye on this information because then we're able to see patterns. We're able to see what changes are happening as a result of the changes she's making in her nutrition and her lifestyle, and then utilizing that information to cue us into the fact that there's change being made, right? Obviously, how you feel is going to make an enormous difference, or understanding how you feel, right? And seeing changes in how you feel is going to allow us to then better clarify that something's working, something's changing. Now with testing, obviously this gives us, more concrete data, but in this case, we're not testing. So at least at this moment in time. So we're just using information that she has gathered across her month and across her period to clarify how how the changes she's making are impacting her. Holy cow, that took me a sec to get out. So I encourage you, pay attention to your symptoms, no matter what hormonal, period in life you're at. Focus on that and know that there's a ton that can be done to make your experience easier. If you're going into perimenopause or you are going through your period and you're in a phase of life where you are still cycling, we are going to cycle no matter what. That's a part of being a woman. But what's not a part about being a woman is accepting painful periods and accepting discomfort. And, the way you set up your environment, the way your body is going to determine how you experience those phases in life. And so take control, take initiative, take authority. That's one of the best advice I can give you. It is still July, which means I am still offering a discounted rate for testing. So take advantage of it. You have to schedule a consult within the month of July in order to gain access to this discount. And we can talk further about what your specific issues are, what exactly is going on for you. But I'm hopeful that this resonates with you because we are we are allowing these issues to persist and this dysfunction to happen. And it's not necessarily exclusive to our hormones. If we do not address this dysfunction, it's going to then manifest in a number of other issues because that's how it works. The body is one whole unit. So we can't necessarily say, oh, well, if I'm having gut dysfunction, it's just going to be in the gut. Or if I'm having liver dysfunction, it's just going to be in the liver. No, it's going to impact the whole body's ability to function. That mindset shift is essential to healing. You have to look at it. And just as you make positive changes in one area, that's going to then make a positive impact in another. So it goes both ways, where dysfunction in one area is not exclusive to that area. And then also improvements in another area is not exclusive to improvements in just that area. So that hopefully is a little bit encouraging because then you're able to feel inspired and motivated to invest and make a change, even small changes. But know that I'm here for you. Details for the discount are in the show notes. Take a look, reflect, schedule a call. We can talk further about your specific needs. And regardless of whether or not you pursue testing, I hope that you take this information and give yourself a little bit of an evaluation and determine where you might be able to make some changes, how this applies to you. Maybe it doesn't apply to you, and that's wonderful. But if it does, or it applies to a friend or a family member, whatever the case is, taking the time to empower, to encourage, to educate, and to take initiative in your health. Take initiative. Do what you have to do. But thank you so much for being here. You're the best. I'm so grateful for you. I love this platform. I think I say that at least once every episode, maybe. And I am so grateful for it. And I'm hopeful that you're grateful for it as well. And I will see you next time. And in the meantime, be well.